Everybody, welcome to Attack with Larry C. I'm your host, Larry Christiansen, and we're going to start off again, like last time, with a combination. Um, this came from, again, another 1 minute game, and also illustrates the importance of looking for those violent forcing moves. Here we come across a position, random looking position, where white is 2 pawns up, but black has an enormous arsenal of force hovering around the hapless white king. I mean, what's that bishop on b7? Basically, he's just doing, he just sits there doing nothing. He's out of play. Of course, the rook's out of play, but maybe we don't need that rook. And even actually, the rook is in play because he's connected to his fellow rook. But maybe we don't even need that rook in particular. So here's a position we always look at violent forcing moves. You'd be looking at knight e2, you'd be looking at queen f4, stuff like that. But especially you look at moves that draw out the enemy king. And a little bit of quick checking reveals that bishop takes h2 will and bring it up. Black follows with a knight check. If the king tries to hide on the first rank, then black comes with queen h5 and wins decisive material. The king cannot escape. That means he's got to come out to the open seas with king g3. Well, he's a sitting duck there with so much material around him. Let's see how the game unfolded. Yes, indeed, he played bishop takes h2, king takes, knight g4 check. If king g3, as mentioned, king g1, we have queen h5, decisive. So up he comes, king g3. But now what? Black now plays queen g5, weaving a little cheap mate. White must take. Horrible threat of knight f5 check, knight e3 check, dozens of threats. He takes. Black now, rook, queen, and knight all combine to deliver a devastating mate. Knight f5 check. Now, if king h3, queen h6 check forces the undesirable queen h4 and then mate. So he goes to f3, and the emperor is finally overthrown with rook e3 check. One last cheap little sack. F takes e3, and we get mate. Look for those violent forcing moves, folks. And now we're going to go over a great little attacking game by Tigran Petrosian, demonstrating that he was not only a great positional player, but quite the tactician as well. And this was a game I had not seen until doing some recent research for the show and going through some of Tigran's early efforts. And also, it illustrates how not to attack with a big, sizable space advantage. Mr. Terpugov gets his clock cleaned by unenergetic, lethargic, passive play. Not well thought out. Okay, here it is. And this is a opening to suits Tigran's style. It's basically, what do you call this opening? It's basically called getting your pieces out quickly. Accepting white space advantage, but black gets his pieces out and reaches a middle game. And now white should play h3. Okay, he takes, fine. And he's got a little advantage, get the bishop pair, space advantage. And Tigran plays knight bd7. Various approaches to this kind of position. Maybe some g4 action is indicated, but he develops solidly. I can't argue with that. Tigran now adopts a French defense type of stance with e6, not e5. So he's going for e6 and d5. And now Terpikov goes after him with g4. Okay, d5. And his next move now closes the center with e5. Now that white gains a lot of space with e5, but now we have a fixed center, and play now center. I shouldn't, bad choice of terms. Now the play, such as it is going to be on the flanks. Black on with b5 and so forth. White hopefully engineering a breakthrough with f4, f5 after due preparation. Black happily goes knight g8. It looks like a Loss of time, but black is happy that the center is closed. Now, lead in development doesn't mean so much. And here, this is called castling into it. White had many other options, including moving the knight to a square like d1 to support his center with c3. Knight d1, bishop d3 was one possibility. Instead, he castles into it with castles long. Now, this is playable, but margin of error is much smaller. And Tigran wastes no time launching his queenside attack. Bishop d3. He might have considered king b1 first, get the king safely tucked away before deciding where to put that bishop. Okay, minor error. And now here comes the knight ready to jump. He does go for his king safety, and the knight jumps. Now bishop takes, pawn takes is not desirable here for white. It is playable, I might add, but it does open the b file. Now white can set up sort of a fortress type formation with king a1 and rook b1 and bishop c1. But black has plenty of plans here. One might be to involve an eventual rook lift to the rook onto a6 to start zeroing in on the a2 pawn. Okay, meanwhile, white's going to try to get f4, f5 going as best he can. I would say its chances are roughly equal. Instead, he plays bishop c1. He decides he can live with that knight on c4. Okay, also playable. And Tigran now rolls out his armada of fours, queen b6, it pressures d4, doesn't really threaten. It threatens to threaten d4. It really doesn't at the moment. What should white do here? You know, there's a strong argument to be made for knight e2, supporting that pawn on d4. But certainly better than the move played, g4, g5. Now, if queen takes d4, white can play bishop g6, hitting the f pawn and the queen. If knight takes e5, white has bishop takes f7 check. Now, if king d8, white can back the queen up with queen e2, and black's pretty well busted. So don't grab straight pawns on d4. On the other hand, g5 had a negative consequence in the fact that now it's hard for white to break open with f4, f5. So this does not look like a smart move. Okay, Tigran happily develops. And now queen takes d4 is becoming more realistic as a threat. Terpikov continues his plan with h4. He wants to play h5 and eventually g6. But now Tigran strikes with c5, generating quick play. On the queen side, also he makes room for a knight to travel to c6 to join his other forces. White captures. Okay, so now black's threatening knight takes e5, and now he plays rook he1, good move, supporting his pawn on e5. And now black has to be careful here. Probably a good idea would have been to play rook b8 right away. And that eliminates certain cheapos involving knight takes b5, as we'll soon discover. And then if white plays h5, here he can consider g6 as a possibility. Instead, Petrosian played g6, and could have meant a cruel fate if white had played this actively. But as we soon discover, Terpikov was not up to the task. He plays b3, good move. And now, not really so much attacking the knight, but setting up other possibilities. He's threatening to threaten the knight. And Petrosian now plays bishop g7. This is a key moment. Petrosian, this is a deep, in some ways, a very deep move, but I'm not sure the best. He could, but of course, black's options were limited to rook b8 or bishop g7. Let's try rook b8. It would have been a more principled continuation. Now, if b takes c4, black immediately gets his piece back. White should pursue his dreams with h5. And black then can consider bishop g7. And if white plays h6, black should not take. That's a pawn that's best left unguarded, untaken. That'll lead to disaster after bishop takes c4. Now b takes c4, that just costs a piece. And if black plays d takes c4, now white wins with knight e4. Now the capture has led to white's total domination of the e4 square. The knight goes for it. If queen c7, now white has the very routine win of simply either knight f6 check or bishop b2, both completely crushing. I should point out, after h6, black can elect to play bishop f8, and the king side is now closed up. And black has a playable position here. White would be well advised to play something along the lines of king a1, avoid taking that knight for the time being. Black can still build up, let's say, with knight c6, but now white has lots of interesting possibilities involving sacrifices on d5 and such. Knight takes d5. Now if e6 is crushing, and if queen takes d5, we get bishop e4. That's also very strong. Instead of playing rook b8, Tigran played bishop g7. And here, Turpikov could have played knight takes b5. Of course, if queen takes b5, bishop takes c4. White utilizes the pin of the pawn on d5. Now black can certainly soldier on here. Maybe queen just simply play queen c5 and castle. And he's got some compensation for the pawn. No question about it. But hard to argue that he has enough comp. White has his own little built-in attack ready to go if and when black castles. But instead, Turpikov says, show me, and grab the knight. That's a knight I would never have grabbed. I would always take that pawn on b5 over this. Petrosian must have been very happy to see this move. And black responds, b takes c4. Now black he sacked the whole piece. And there appears to be no forced mate. But in this position, here are the trumps that black receives for the piece. He gets the B file. He gets time to fully mobilize all his forces. He's got these two pawns that are very powerful foot soldiers ready to bear down with d4 and c3 and moves like that. And also the bishop on g7 is looking down on a potential king on a1 in a very hungry fashion. So b takes c4. This was a major mistake. This is greed gone wild. Okay, bishop f1. And Tigran castles. You'd have to be a defensive Houdini to hold white here. And I don't think it could be done. Okay, king a1. There it is. King opposite bishop. Sad story. And now Petrosian builds up beautifully. Rook f b8. So he understands, the bishop may need that f8 square. You never know. Gives him a little more room to operate. And also, in the event he can lift the rook and perhaps be supported, that rook on a8 may still be active on the a file. Okay, Turpikov going backwards with knight b1. Now he could have considered a move like queen e3 instead. Forcing move. Petrosian can play queen a5. And then f4. That's the idea behind queen e3. f4 to shut down that bishop. But now the knight on e7 joins the fray. And he plays knight f5. White has to hold on to the knight on c3. He tries queen h3. Black calmly doubles. Rook b7. White has nothing better, really. He's got to get bishop b2 in before it's too late. But bishop e2 fails routinely. To the sham sack, rook takes b2. King takes b2. Bishop f8. Bishop can operate very powerfully on the long diagonal, and white's king cannot escape the threats and attack of the black's combined forces. Rook e2, that's the best move available. Here comes the rook into the fray. Rook b8 check. Now if king c1, d4 rears its ugly head. Taking now, if the knight moves, we have no escape square on d2 available. So the whole position is a total wreck. And if rook king a1, black wins trivially with bishop b4 hitting the knight, and if knight b1, c3, that cuts off all of white's forces, and white has no defense to an attack on b2. Not to mention a little rook lift wouldn't hurt either. A whole rook down, white's helpless. So going back here, he played knight b1. That didn't really help matters either. Petrosian now goes full bore, brings the knight into the attack. f5 also was promising, but it's both excellent choices. And he tried Turpikov. Now the ending is quite nice. He can just sit there and suffer. Petrosian now sacks, gets rid of the white's only the key defender. Rook takes b1. King takes. There was no defense. Check. And c3, that cutoff move that cuts off the queen. And white's king, a forlorn figure on a1 against that withering attack. He tries bishop d2. There's nothing to be done. If queen g4, for instance, black just plays d4, keeping the queen cut off from aiding her helpless mate. So he tries bishop d2. Please take my bishop. Tigran, no thank you. He prefers attacking. Now if queen takes c3, we get mate on c2. So white's vulnerable on a2, b2, and c2 here with one move. And the game ended with the absolutely feeble bishop d3. And Tigran is an artist, not a butcher. Of course, he can force mate with queen a5. But the artist in Tigran comes out now with queen c4, threatening mate, violent forcing move. And now we get bishop takes c4, meeting the threat, but now knight takes c2, mate is delivered. Fine game by young Tigran Petrosian of 1957 that was played. Zenit versus Spartak, Russian team tournament. And a good example of why Tigran became world champion in 1963, 6 years later. And that'll do it for this episode of Attack with Larry C. Don't forget to keep looking for those violent forcing moves, how important they are. And that's the key to being sharp at the chessboard. Okay, that'll do it for now. Thanks for joining me.